And I am ready. I don't know if you heard me say that or not. Hey, y'all, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I'm glad you're here. Today's going to be a little bit different from a schedule standpoint. I know I've said this a lot recently. It seems like we've had a lot going on. I got to get off the air here really close to on time, close to 11 this morning, so we're not going to have as many comments near the end. I'm going to try to make time for some during the regular portion of the show, and a lot of you have been talking a bit about the interview we did with Greg McGarity last week. We're going to show you that as a part of DawgNation Daily. For those of you who didn't get a chance to see that. And while we do that, you're going to have a choice. You can either watch the interview and kind of follow along like you normally would. I'm also going to interact, using the typing, using my fingers in our Facebook and YouTube comment sections during that portion of the show. So if you want to do some comment stuff back and forth, I'll do it with you in kind of a chat format while the Greg McGarity interview is ongoing. We've also got some really fun stuff on today's program. We will preview what is slated to be a top 5 reveal for 5-star cornerback Keeley Ringo. I believe that Georgia will be among his top 5, and I think that Georgia's got a strong pitch for Ringo, which I'll explain on today's show. And someone has predicted Florida to win the SEC East. We will do what must be done with that and count all the ways in which that's wrong on today's program. It's going to be a fun one. I'm glad you're with you. I'm glad you're with us, I should say. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, I'm going to start with a story that eventually is going to lead me to Keeley Ringo, the 5-star cornerback. But before that, let me go back in time. Let me go back to just before the start of the 2018 season. And obviously for a guy like Tucker, a lot of those expectations were going to center around cornerback DeAndre Baker, who had played really well for Georgia in 2017. And over the course of that offseason, had kind of generated a little bit of draft buzz. At first, maybe a little bit surprisingly to some, because of defense, but leading into the start of the 2018 season for Baker, that had kind of become true. And I loved the honesty with which then Georgia defensive coordinator Mel Tucker spoke with when it came to Baker. To know how things turned out now, to hear Mel Tucker say this then, I think is really interesting. Let's go back in time and hear the former Georgia DC on DeAndre Baker.
The first day I saw him, we were in our offseason program. I saw him doing some of the drills, and I pulled him over and I said, hey, I think you could be a heck of a player here. You're 6 feet tall. You're the fastest guy out here. You got good change of direction. You got great length. And I said, I really believe that you can do something here. That's all you got to do is listen, pay attention, do what I ask you to do what we ask you to do. And that's what he did. And so, that's it's a credit to him. You develop players along the way. Guys buy into our program. Now, whether he's a first-round pick or all that, who knows? We don't know that. But the focus right now for him is to get better each and every day. Work on the details, technique and fundamentals, doing the things that got you to this point and then taking it up a notch. That's what we want to do with him.
Mel Tucker says, going into last season, I want to see DeAndre Baker take it up a notch. I want to see him keep working hard, growing and developing, not worry about that draft stuff. I just want to see him get better on the football field each and every day. Well, I think those of us who lived through the 2018 season can say that Baker kept his word on that promise. That each and every game, seemingly Baker took his level of play to a higher point. To by the time the year was all said and done, you heard a guy like ESPN's Chris Fowler having a conversation with DeAndre Baker that went a little something like this.
There have been lots of Georgia players win awards. You are the first Georgia player to be honored as the most outstanding defensive back in the country. What does that mean to you?
Man, it means a lot for me to represent my family in Liberty City, Miami, where I come from. Just a blessing to be here.
He says it means a lot to me to represent my family where I come from down in the Liberty City area of South Florida, and it's just a blessing to be here. So think about that story for a second, and think about what it must have felt like to have been a Georgia coach like Mel Tucker, or what it must have felt like DeAndre Baker in his own right to kind of go through all of this, where you make a name for yourself kind of the first time you get on the football field, and then you keep getting better, You start last season with a kind of a prodigious level of hype, and then you even take that to a higher level to the point that by the end of the year, you are the Jim Thorpe Award winner as the nation's top defensive back. And then in that first round of the NFL draft, you had your name called by the New York Giants, and you move on and you culminate all of this with the dream of making the millions of dollars that come from being a first-round pick. Listen, the people that listen and watch the show are Georgia fans, so this will be celebrated as a Georgia story, and I understand that. But in a roundabout way, it's also just kind of a modern-day success story, period. It's really the kind of, fable that can, I think, motivate us all a little bit about how hard work and perseverance paid off for DeAndre Baker. And the latest example of that is something that Baker put on Instagram this week. Now, I realize for those of you who are listening, either radio or podcast, you can't see this, but I will describe it because on Baker's Instagram feed, he kind of did the thing that so many guys who are on the doorstep of playing in the NFL dream about. There's a picture of Baker with his mom, and he's giving his mom one of these, and this is kind of a new category of car. I'll never drive one of these, but I have learned a little bit about these. These are like these really ultra-luxury SUVs. This is a Bentley, a white Bentley, and I believe it's a white Bentley SUV. These are things that, not to get into Baker's business here, but these are things that cost like $200,000, if not more than that. I think Lamborghini's got one of these. Bentley's got kind of its entry into this special class of vehicle right here. And DeAndre Baker's able to give one of those to his mom. And there, if you're watching a video, you see more of the video as they're kind of doing this. I mean, can you imagine what that must be like? She's in tears, overcome by emotion. I mean, first of all, it's exciting, of course, to be able to get a car like this. There's no doubt about that. But it's also the meaning and the poignance of it to know it came from your son because of the work that he's done and the support that you showed him along the way. Because the fact of the matter is, she's not getting that vehicle, or if she hadn't, been there for Baker and encouraged him along the way, provided him with everything that he needed along the way. And this is DeAndre Baker's way of saying thanks to her. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a Georgia fan or not. That is a pretty special moment there. That is a really, really great thing to see. And it's just a terrific time for DeAndre Baker and kind of the end point of a story that started with him at Georgia quite some time ago, that, yes, he really did develop into everything that he could be. And now to the victory go the spoils as far as all that goes. However, here on DawgNation Daily, admittedly, we also think about the next generation of Georgia star. And as happy as I am for Baker in particular, there is a degree to which Georgia fans say, ooh, this is not only good for him and terrific for his family and kind of a great modern-day American success story, it is also a bit of a springboard to future recruiting success. Because it just so happens that on the day that this kind of comes to light, DeAndre Baker really living the life of a first-round cornerback, another cornerback is on the verge of continuing his recruitment, providing a key update here today. You have heard us on this show talk an awful lot about five-star cornerback Keeley Ringo, who was at Georgia for G-Day and has seemingly had a good relationship with some UGA commits, such as Mikhail Sherman and others. Well, Ringo's been saying for a while, and even teased this again yesterday, I'll show it to you on Twitter, that his top 5 is set to drop here on June 27th. Now, for those of you that have heard us talk about this before, you've heard me say that June 27th has been a key date for Georgia recruiting. I know Connor Riley has kind of pointed this out as well. This was the date a couple years ago that Samir White committed to Georgia. That was his mom's birthday. Is today Keeley Ringo's birthday? Is that why he's doing June 27th? And, of course, he and Zamir have kind of had a little bit of an interaction with this on Twitter themselves. So the top 5 coming from Keeley Ringo supposedly today on his birthday, June 27th, a date that kind of will serve as a bit of a reminder for some Georgia fans here. But the reason why these two stories tie together, I think, is self-evident. If I'm a Georgia coach right now, my only message to Keeley Ringo before he drops his top 5, and everyone assumes that Georgia will be a part of it, but if my only message is, does your mom like Bentleys? Because that's what the last cornerback that left this program was. They left here. And you may say, especially if you're a non-Georgia fan, you may say, well, come on, BA. It wasn't Georgia alone that provided that for DeAndre Baker. He was a good player. He did this on his own. And I'm not trying to discount Baker's own role in his own success, and yet we'll see the development of another cornerback, a guy like Eric Stokes. Now, I'm not going to try to tell you that Stokes is going to do this year what DeAndre Baker did last year. That'd be asking probably too much. But it is a similar story in that thus far, Stokes, as a starting cornerback for Georgia, has exceeded the expectations that you otherwise would have had for him based on his recruiting profile coming out of high school. Yes, indeed, player development at the defensive back position seems to be one of those spots where no one can question what's going on at Georgia. It's one of the reasons why Georgia's recruited well at the position. Guys like Devod Wilson and Tyson Campbell, who are in the mix, Tyreek Stevenson, who are there and awaiting their turn for more playing time this year. And the next generation of them could be the five-star cornerback, Keeley Ringo. There is no doubt that Ringo's got a big choice in front of him. The 5 schools that he'll be contemplating, I'm sure he's got plenty of good reasons to choose them all. But when it comes to Georgia, the recent success this program has enjoyed with defensive backs, the fact that Kirby Smart, the head coach, takes such a hands-on approach to those defensive backs, my guess is that's a pretty good pitch for UGA, and it's one that I'm guessing that Ringo is probably listening pretty closely to. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you. Thanks for being with us. Live on video today, 10 a.m., DawgNation, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or on the radio at noon, of course, on Athens Sports Radio 960, The Ref. And as a podcast, Apple Podcast Player, the Google Podcast Player, the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are just really glad to have you with us in the program today. I will give you one quick programming note. Normal show today, although maybe a little bit different for reasons that I'll get into in a moment. Normal show tomorrow, although really fully loaded, as I said before, for reasons I'll also kind of get into in a moment. And then the following week, the week of the 4th of July, which is next week, I will be on vacation. So no video show at 10 a.m. next week. We're going to have a couple of podcasts that I think are going to be fun. We'll have those up and running for you. If you're normally a video listener, we'll make the podcast for you easy to find. So we'll have a couple podcasts next week, no video show. But then the following Monday after that, we are back ready for the full run through the 2019 season, signing day and beyond. No days off for us after that. We're going to put the pedal to the metal. So let us take a little vacation next week, and then we'll be back the following week to take you all the way through the fun of the 2019 season. Now, speaking of summer fun, we got some of that coming up, too, on Thursday, August 1st at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa as a part of our next phase of DawgNation Days of Summer. Y'all, these rooms are going fast. I think a lot of this is to do with the word of mouth from our previous DawgNation Days of Summer event. I'm really happy to say that the people who were there had a really good time. And I think the VIP experience especially was a lot of fun for people. This is a reception that night that starts at 5 p.m. That's an hour before the regular event begins at 6. This is, we had some special gifts and a lot of fun. You know, this is just a real unique experience, one that I was proud to be a part of. People seem to like it, and we've already essentially almost sold out for those VIP experiences for Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa on Thursday, August 1st. So please, if you were on the fence about coming, don't wait to book, because the last thing I want you to do is finally decide, okay, maybe I should go there. BA says it's going to be fun. And then you go to DawgNation.com and find those VIP experiences have sold out. I don't want you to miss out. So get in there and be involved with that before all of that happens. All right, for now, let's go around the doghouse here today, presented by Online Trading Academy. And it was bound to happen somewhere. And it has happened now. Someone has picked Florida to win the SEC East. Now, what bothers me about this most of all is the person that did the picking here was a recent guest here on DawgNation Daily, Pete Futak from collegefootballnews.com. Now, I'm going to be very honest for a moment. I still like Pete even after this. Collegefootballnews.com is one of those websites I was reading years ago, back when there was not quite as much college football news on the internet as there is today. So I've always had kind of a special affection for that website. I think Pete does a good job. I think Pete is clearly wrong with his pick on Florida. He's actually got Georgia losing 2 regular season games, head-to-head versus the Gators in Jacksonville, and then a couple of weeks after that at Auburn. He's got Georgia going 10-2 in the regular season. Now, 10-2 in this regular season for Georgia would be something close to an unmitigated disaster. But for those of you who are gnashing teeth and ready to ask what's up with Futak on this, it is important to point out a little context, and I say this with all love and charity. Futak was also singing a similar story last year as well. Let me play you a clip going into the 2018 season, where Futak, who's high on Florida for 2019, was apparently also high on the Gators and, believe it or not, the Vols in 2018. So the guy that's picking Florida to win the East this year, here's what he said about him last year.
Tennessee and Florida, kind of the same boat, different thing. Tennessee's going to be better. they're not going to win the SEC East, but they're going to at least not be a speed bump like they were last year. And they did have their chances. If they didn't lose, on that last second throw, to Florida, and they had a couple of other close calls along the way, and then they just melted down obviously at the end. But there's enough talent there where they can be a danger. Florida, I do think, can flip that switch quickly. Remember, they did go to 2 straight SEC championships under Jim McElwain. So there's enough there where if you get the right formula on the right day, they can absolutely rise up and rock just that one day in a cocktail party where they can pull off that upset win. They could be good enough under Mullen to just have that tweak offensively right out of the gate.
So listen, I like Pete Futak. I'm a fan of his work, but it's fair to point out the wishful thinking of a more exciting, competitive SEC East is something that's been pitched by media members, himself included, before. Now in 2018 and 2019, it's fair to point out that Georgia won that game a year ago by 19 points, and I don't see any reason to expect it to be any closer here this season as well. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by Online Trading Academy. Everybody wants more money, but it's hard sometimes to know how to get it. My advice to you is learn how the markets work for you. Investing, that's the way to have more money, and the best decision you can make is the decision to invest in yourself. That means learning about how different trading styles work, asset classes, and Online Trading Academy gives you a chance to do that both in the classroom and online. They are just one click away. TradingAcademy.com/Atlanta. TradingAcademy.com/Atlanta, and you can start making money in the markets. All right, special treat here on today's program. Many of you have talked about what went down last week with DawgNation interviewing Greg McGarity. For the folks who may have missed that, I want to give you a chance to hear that as part of our show right now. I'm with Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity here in his office in Athens, the Buttsmere Heritage Hall. First of all, thank you so much for spending time with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's great to have you guys here.
Well, it's great to be here. And, summertime on a college campus is a little interesting, a little different than normal. Mm-hmm. What is life like kind of now that the athletic calendar is over and football looming? What's life like for you these days?
Well, we're trying to wrap up our fiscal year, which ends June 30th. And then we'll open the books on the new budget, which this year is approaching $154 million. We'll start July 1. So it's almost like Christmas time for a business office because they're trying to get all the expenses in, everything that we can calculate to go ahead and end the fiscal year. But really it's a time for preparation for us, getting ready for the football season, volleyball, soccer. They obviously start in this fall. So it's a lot of time for our staff to take a break too, because when these young people come back really July 8th for the second session of summer school, we have almost virtually all our student athletes back. So while we're not competing, everybody's preparing for the 2020 academic year. So a lot of activity, a lot of summer school, a lot of off-season conditioning. So it'll be really, really busy picking up July 8th.
It's interesting to hear you say that because obviously you work in sports, which is an aspiration for so many people, and yet it's a lot about budgets and fundraising and business and things like that. On most days sitting in this office doing what you do, does it feel like sports or does it feel like really any other kind of big business?
Well, not this time of year because like you mentioned, there's no competition going on. So our efforts are primarily focused on fundraising and trying to get ahead of the game as far as planning for facilities, going ahead and getting them ready, making sure they're ready for practices and things of that nature. So we've got several projects ongoing right now that we're trying to make sure they're in place for this academic year. But a lot of it's just planning, preparation to make sure that really when you have a lot of people on campus and you're into the game management aspect of it, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting in June and July.
I want to talk to you about some of the issues that are going on with the program right now, and as you might imagine, I hear from a lot of Georgia fans about the Georgia-Florida rivalry in Jacksonville, where they want that to be. You obviously hear from a lot more than I do. If you had to guess, what is the balance of opinion right now in terms of staying in Jacksonville and going somewhere else, or at home and home?
Well, it's usually, I think any decision of that nature is going to be 50-50 or 60-40 one way or another. There's been feedback from a lot of people on why the game should move, why the game should stay in Jacksonville. You know, it's been there since 1933, and I know Kirby's been very vocal about the importance in recruiting, and that's certainly an important element of it, but there are a lot of other elements that go into the decision. So we're waiting to have further discussions with the city of Jacksonville to where we can receive maybe more updated information on what we may be looking at down the road. What will we receive? We'll evaluate it, but you know, when we do receive that, we'll huddle with our peers at the University of Florida. We'll huddle internally with Kirby and the president and maybe some other staff members to really give it a deep dive into what's best for the University of Georgia, and I'm sure Georgia and Florida will be on the same page. We usually are on a lot of issues, but there's a lot of work to be done. But again, we're in Jacksonville through 2021, so it's not something that has to be done right this second.
You mentioned Kirby's feelings about recruiting and wanting to host recruits in Athens. Most people take that to mean that Coach Smart would like to move this game out of Jacksonville. Is that a fair characterization of his opinion?
I think that's pretty much where Kirby stands, because he's him better than anybody. He is just a recruiting guru. So anytime something's done to take away from that effort, I think it feels like it affects our program. But there's so many other things going on in that game with that weekend that you've got to look at every aspect of it, because a lot of people from Macon south and Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, we've got a lot of fans in North Florida that really love that game. So there are a lot of things to consider, but we'll all get together, and at the end of the day, whatever decision we make, it'll be our decision.
You mentioned the fact that you and Florida have kind of worked as partners on this. You would have the option, though, to end this unilaterally. You can't obviously violate the contract, but when it's time to move on, if that's what Georgia wants to do, you wouldn't require any cooperation from Florida to want to move on if that was the case, correct?
I don't think that'll happen, because we both think alike in this game, but who knows if it's their home game, who knows where they could take it. If it's our home game, I know we'd like it here. There's been some talk of Atlanta. I'm not really sure that has much legs. If you're not going to play it in Jacksonville, then the games need to be on campus.
And then one more thing on that subject before we move on. I have a theory that if you try to do the rotational thing, which some people have suggested, Athens, Gainesville, Jacksonville, that once you don't play in Jacksonville every year anymore, that kind of loses some of its juice too. That's just my theory, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think we both lived through it. I was at Florida when the games were on campus, I think 94, 95, and it was just a regular game. There was no jazz to it. I know they were lopsided games there, but it was like any other game. So I think the uniqueness of the game creates a dynamic there that's unmatched other than Texas, Oklahoma. But a lot of great things to it that go on other than the game. All my buddies, they're down on the beach and they don't even go to the stadium. They just go down the beach to watch the game. So a lot of different people do a lot of different things. So we're all over the map in what people would like to do.
Another issue where there's a lot of internal debate among fans right now is the alcohol policy at Sanford Stadium. The SEC's kind of loosened the reins on sales in the common area. You guys have decided that you want to sell to kind of premium donors in the premium seating area. Is it fair to say that those who don't want alcohol sales in Sanford Stadium are more vocal than those that do? The intensity on the side of the refrain side?
Absolutely. I'd say it's at least 2 to 1 on those that like it as it is, and they're okay in these premium areas or where they're not general seating areas. They know in a lot of these premium areas they're actually in seats. If you're on a bench and the seats are 18 inches wide, it's kind of tight. It's not the best in the world, but I do feel like it's very vocal on those that are against it in the general seating areas. But there are a lot of things to play out. I know we mentioned we're going to conduct a review. We will have some experts come in, and if we were to do it, how would we do it? Because right now all our concession stands are manned like they are in college football by groups of youngsters or volunteers. So to be able to serve alcohol, you've got to do it in certain areas. They got to be certified, licensed. So there are a lot of things that go into it as far as the liability piece of it. It's really not a revenue decision. I know people might disagree with that, but the number, I'm not sure it moves the needle for us to be able to say we're doing this because of revenue. That will not be part of the discussion at all, because probably at best you may generate some income. But it takes, right now we have challenges in our concession stands enough, and we've gone to really a grab-and-go concept. We've done away with things that takes someone to prepare for. So really it's grab, you go, you pay for it, because we know people want to get through the lines in a hurry. But I don't think I'd be able to stack up a row of 8-ounce beers.
Sure.
Nobody likes a warm beer. So we think of the time it would take to do that, the number of locations we'd have to do it, and so we've got to analyze how long would it take. If you're at the 10th person in line, it might take a minute to pour a beer. So we've got to analyze all that and find out where we could do it within the confines of the stadium.
When the announcement was made, the national media kind of paid attention to the line of demarcation, $100,000 donors, $250,000 be guaranteed. Do you regret it any time it kind of comes out that it seems that Georgia's showing extra preference to its highest dollar donors. From a perception standpoint, how do you react to that?
Well, I think it's such a small number. Right now in the McGill Club that will be I think we'll call it the McGill Lounge, there are only 200 donors in there. I mean, we've got over 1,000 donors in the McGill Society. So it's only a fraction of individuals, but what is sort of a good problem to have. We have a lot of interest. A lot of people have really given large donations. We really can't move their seat location until somebody gives up their seat location. So what do we have as an alternative to that? And so this is an alternative that among that group would say, well, let's offer this opportunity here. But you can't see the game. You know, so it's going to be maybe on a rainy, wet day or a cold day, people may hang out in there. But it's pretty much like that in college sports and professional sports. They're just different groups that are able to enjoy certain things, but I don't think we're ready right now to go over to the general seating area.
It almost leads to a different discussion as well, and this is not a problem unique to UGA, but you know, college football in general is becoming kind of an expensive proposition, especially for y'all because you've been winning so much over the last couple of years. A lot of fans have been traveling. How much time, if any, is spent saying, what do we do for the rank and file fan, the non-McGill Society donor, maybe the person that can't even afford season tickets anymore? What's out there now for the fan kind of below that financial consideration?
Well, we want to make sure what we have functions properly. I think everybody's familiar with the south side of the stadium. There's really nowhere to expand the concourses. We'd have to knock out Field Street and probably go towards the chemistry building. That's probably not going to happen. So, you know, we need to make sure that concessions are functioning at the highest rate possible. Restrooms, that we're adding as many as we can and making sure they're clean, things along those lines. But we also want to keep our prices stable. Right now we're at $75 for our premium games, $55, but our season tickets have not increased this year, and hopefully we don't have to increase in the future. That's always probably the most controversial thing you can do is raise ticket prices. But we've not had to do that because we've been very successful fundraising. So when you're able to generate the amount of money we are through the McGill Society, I'm not having to spend our operating expenses to pay for facilities because the money that's coming in the McGill Society is 100% spent toward facilities. So we're able to do certain things for other programs, and we just need to make it the best it can possibly be. Can the aisles get wider? You know, and we'd love to do that, but you're going to lose seats. So there are a lot of things. Could we put handrails in the lower level? Well, we're in a situation where we really don't want to lose any tickets. So we try to make sure, you know, winning is the main thing. It's not the only thing. But we try to focus on traffic. We try to focus on, if we were going to the game, what would be our pinch points and our concerns. You know, if you go to the restroom, we may, starting with some technology, try to channel people to some areas that aren't used, because we do have a lot of restrooms, but we tried to upgrade them, keep them clean. We have custodians at every area of the stadium. So we're not perfect, but what we try to do is make it the best it can possibly be and have a great experience on the video board, make sure that the pageantry on the stadium, on the field, is at its best to where people can really enjoy the college atmosphere.
Auburn wanted some scheduling relief because it has to play at Georgia and Alabama every other year. The SEC did that. You guys seem to want to go along with that. But one question I get asked by a lot of fans is, what did Georgia get out of this? Did Georgia gain by going along with this agreement?
Well, I think once the schedules are announced, a lot of questions will be answered. I would just say be careful what you wish for in some situations, because we know what the schedules look like. We've seen it. So some school may want to do X, Y, or Z. Well, there are a lot of unintended consequences with that, because it's not to where one school has an advantage. Every schedule we have, future schedule, is vetted by Kirby and Josh Lee. They chop it up. If we have problems with that, we get back to the SEC office and are able to give our opinion. And so far, we have not had any issues in that area. I think once it's announced that, I know there's some concern about tradition and the time, the segment of time in there, but if that game's at a different time for us and it works and Kirby's comfortable with it, you know, we're okay with it.
You mentioned Kirby being comfortable with it. At the beginning of spring practice, he did say that you can't judge a schedule until you see it in its totality. That seemed like less than a full endorsement of the decision for me, especially given the fact that, as I understand it, the trades with Tennessee, which is on the same home-road rotation, I expected him to be more in favor of it based on some of the things that had been said prior to those comments. Do you take that the same way that I do?
No, again, we have a schedule. Every school is able to comment on it, and if there's a big problem, then the conference is able to work that out. And I would say in every instance, we've never had a situation there to where we are just so frustrated with. No one was happy with the Auburn back-to-back, but there were 6 schools involved in having to go back-to-back to a venue, because when we added A&M and we added Missouri, certain things had to happen. So, we're not able to really, I don't like to talk about publicly when we disagree with things, but that wasn't ideal. No one liked it, but you're a member of a conference. There are 14 other members, and you're not going to get your way every time. So you have to basically be good partners in there. So I don't think we have any issues with any schedule.
One more thing on this subject, the fan uses the phrase payback. Hey, they would say Auburn owes Georgia something for them. Kirby Smart even referenced that last spring in Destin. Is it too simplistic to say that Auburn owes Georgia a favor after that?
I think there would be 3 other schools that say, well, we need the same thing. But it's part of expansion. It was not easy on really a lot of people, because a lot of things had to change. Traditional dates had to change. So back in that day, when you add schools to the conference, and I'm sure if there are schools added in the future, they're going to be the same type issues there, because it's very difficult to make schedules. It's very, very difficult to make 14 schools get everything that they want. But I'll say this, on our priorities, the conference listens to us, and basically we've had a good run there.
A couple more things before we wrap up. We certainly appreciate your time. You recently signed a 1-year contract extension. At the time, you said you wanted to be 1 year. I know you've gone into some details on this in the past, but would you mind just speaking to a little bit about why it was your preference to have a 1-year deal as opposed to a longer extension?
Yeah, I think something that I was very comfortable with. It's the same deal that the president has. So I've always felt like it should be a year-to-year deal here. Our goal is here, we'll sit down and evaluate it at the end of the maybe in January or February, just see how things are going and everything. But it gives everybody total flexibility instead of signing a long-term deal, and all of a sudden if you decide that it's time to move on, it's the best way to handle it. I think it's certainly the way I'm very comfortable with it, and the president is as well. So he and I are basically on the same grounds as far as our contracts.
Is it your expectation that you would be here through the end of the building of the football facility that so many people are so curious about?
We don't know the timelines yet. We're going through that right now. Matter of fact, I think that's one thing that even though there's no shovels in the ground, there is a tremendous amount of work almost every day on getting everything set the way that the football staff would like it. And this will have Kirby's fingerprints all over it, but I know he's excited about it. He wants it done tomorrow, but there are a lot of dynamics involved. But I'll say this, once it's completed, it's going to be certainly the best in the country. One
of the things that Georgia's gotten a lot of attention for the last few months is this, what I would call very aggressive non-conference scheduling philosophy. It's a lot of fun for fans. How much of this is Kirby kind of pushing for this on his own? How much of this is you guys working in concert with each other? You're obviously not going to reveal all the details of behind-the-scenes conversations, but I guess, what is it like when y'all talk about scheduling philosophies and what has manifested itself in front of all of us?
Well, certainly there's some direction, some desires expressed by Kirby, and I have to give a lot of credit to Josh Lee, because what Josh Lee will do is call his counterparts at these schools, like at Oklahoma, are you interested? At Texas, are you interested? And obviously, I know the respective ADs at those schools, so we'll talk at a certain level about once a lot of the heavy lifting is done. But Josh has done a splendid job in contacting these teams, and I'm all for it. But it's all about relationships, and it's all about your brand. So if you don't lock those games up now, they won't be available down the road. For instance, like Oklahoma's 2023 and 31. Well, the only way to get that game is to make that difference in the years work. And it's not perfect. We'd love to have Oklahoma here in 24, but the only way we could schedule the game, because they've already scheduled like we have in those years between 24 and 30. So we just want to get the games on the books. The big thing is it's a home and home. And so you've got FSU, you've got Texas, you know, and then we're going to Atlanta and playing Oregon and Virginia and Clemson, and then you got the Clemson. So a lot of things for people to look forward to down the road.
Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium's coming this year. That's exciting for a lot of fans, especially those like me who kind of grew up in the Dooley era. Some have also said it took too long to happen. From your perspective, did it take too long to honor Coach Dooley and former athletic director?
Gosh, that's, you know, it's just hard to say. I would say that you know, we're so excited about that happening. Matter of fact, I spoke to Coach Dooley earlier today on just some of the details, which we haven't got all the details worked out, but enough to where we know that we're going to have a very nice event on Friday night, and then pregame around 3:30 or 3:40 on game day, because the game kicks at 4. We're going to have a very nice event in the stadium. But it's something we're all looking forward to, and it was really a fun day when the president and I went to 755 Millage Circle to talk to Coach Dooley about that opportunity.
Around the campus, a lot of other interesting things happening to sports programs. Men's basketball's probably never recruited better than it has now. It was an interesting season for the baseball, although I know Coach Strickland would have liked to see it end differently. Just kind of your overall perspective on some of the sports that maybe get less attention than football, kind of where you see those things right now.
Well, from a national competitive standard, we probably weren't where we've been in the past. I mean, I'm looking out my window now of 2 NCAA track championships. You know, the men finished in 4th place this year in the outdoor, and the women really struggled, but we had some individuals leave, turn professional. If you can imagine that, we have individuals turning professional in the sport of track. And we had an injury to one of our sprinters that's well documented there, but you know, Jeff Wallace had a phenomenal year, runner-up national champions. You know, as I was driving back from, or we were coming back from Orlando, I said, gosh, you know, we were so close. So I went back and did some research and got with Claude, and I said, how many times have we finished second or runner-up in the country? And Claude and I were sitting there, and I said, you know, I started thinking about football once, tennis once, and we found out over the last, since 2011, we finished runner-up 16 times. So if half of those come true, or a third of them come true, you know, we would stack a lot more NCAA championships. So you can look at it both ways. It could have been a little bit better, could have been a lot better with a few more national championships, but I would say we did okay. I mean, there's tremendous room for growth here, but I know a lot of people are excited about, obviously, football, baseball, what Scott was able to do, and you know, it's only the 13th time we've ever been to the NCAA championships in baseball. I mean, Lou Harris Champer's taken us to softball 18 times in a row. So we're in new turf. And if we're able to go to the NCAA championship in baseball next year, it'd be the first time in the history of our program we've been there 3 years in a row. So we're in our infancy about stacking years after years, like Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Florida, LSU in baseball. But I've got confidence Scott has laid that foundation. And then what Tom's done from a basketball standpoint, I've been over there and watched practice, because we can practice in the summer in a limited way. And these young men look a lot different than in the past. And I think our fans are so excited about what Tom's been able to do in a short amount of time. But, you know, gymnastics had a great year. We had pockets of really, really wonderful achievements this year, and pockets that were so-so. So, you know, I'm to the point where I want to have 21 sports that are all challenging for national championships. It hadn't happened yet, but there's always a chance that that will happen.
You're very gracious to spend some time with us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really enjoyed that conversation with Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity. Glad to be able to share that as part of DawgNation Daily here today. And really, when I wrote about this for DawgNation.com, I didn't really mention this part of it, but I thought it was kind of maybe among the more interesting things was the fact that McGarity said, you know, some of his friends go to Jacksonville for the game. They don't actually go to the stadium, which we all have friends that kind of do that same thing. I don't know if that's just him speaking figuratively or if that really is true, but it's kind of interesting to hear him give voice to something that a lot of Georgia fans have a lot of familiarity with, which is the folks who do enjoy going to Jacksonville, but not necessarily always buying that ticket and going inside the Gator Bowl Stadium there. So this is one of those subjects that's going to be ongoing, and we'll kind of see if it ever does come to any resolution, or if the resolution that occurs is different from what the current status is. For now, though, let me do our SEC through here. And Chris Lowe had a piece at ESPN.com that I've been trying to get to for a couple days. Haven't had a ton of time to be able to do this, but I want to kind of get to it now. The headline at ESPN.com is College Football Schedule Superlatives for the 2019 season. And Lowe kind of hands out some awards. He gives the toughest overall Power 5 schedule, for instance. He gives that to Auburn. Now, he makes his case for why it should be Auburn, but so help me, I have a hard time understanding how any team other than South Carolina, which he does acknowledge, or Texas A&M, could end up with the toughest schedule in the country. Now, part of this is he just probably wants to mention a few different teams. Texas A&M gets mentioned later on. But when you are slated in the regular season to play Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia, what I believe is likely the top 3 teams in the 2 official polls, the coaches in the AP poll when they come out, when you have those games scheduled in the regular season, how could anybody be playing a tougher schedule than that? In the case of Texas A&M, they go on the road to Clemson, on the road to Georgia. I don't right offhand remember where the Alabama game is this year, but at least 2 of those 3 games are on the road. South Carolina got a load to deal with there as well. So if you're asking me toughest overall schedule, I'm probably giving that to South Carolina or Texas A&M, but nonetheless, Chris Lowe weighs in on that as he does. A couple other SEC teams that gets mentioned. He talks about Kentucky having a, quote, cushy close to the season, playing against UT Martin, Louisville, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. All those teams, in some form or fashion, are kind of outside the teams that are largely expected to be contenders. There is a flip side of this to Kentucky, though. I've said before that I think that when you look at the roster for the Wildcats this year, it is well below where it has been last year when they're a top 15 team. A cushy close to the season means you're playing a lot of tougher games earlier. I think it could be kind of a tricky situation for Stoops in November with all those tougher, more challenging games for the Wildcats pushed earlier in the season. Lexington may not be a happy place come November, just given what Kentucky lost from a year ago, what the early schedule for them kind of looks like. Chris Lowe, ESPN, also mentions Texas A&M about their, quote, as he calls it, road-weary schedule. He said Michigan State gets mentioned here as well, but the Aggies play at Clemson, then at Georgia, and at LSU on this season. And this is one of my personal points of frustration, that I do believe there's a bit of an implicit SEC bias that exists with the media. Now, I'm not talking about Chris Lowe in particular. I'm going to use Lowe's point to make a larger point. And this is not the kind of thing where people just necessarily hate the SEC. I think what they hate is the fact that one region of the country dominates the college football landscape as just ferociously as the SEC does. And so there's always kind of a way to kind of balance the playing field. There's always kind of a way to hopefully tip the scales in favor of a non-SEC team. And one of the ways in which that's done is with the non-conference schedules. Anytime you hear these talking heads on ESPN talking about, who plays the toughest schedule in college football, the thin slice that always gets picked out and pointed out is the non-conference schedules. Now, my guess is you're going to hear less of that in the years to come because the SEC now is playing as many elite Power 5, non-conference games as anybody. But before, that was the thin slice that was pulled out. Do you remember the way that Georgia was attempted to be bludgeoned with that a year ago? But that's not the only thin slice by which you could judge a schedule. You can highlight just the non-conference games if you want, or you can highlight just the road games if you want. If you made a list of the 5 toughest road schedules in any year, the SEC are going to have the top 5 of those virtually every single one of those years. Nobody plays more consistently tough road games than the SEC does because in every single year you're going to be on the road at 2 or 3 behemoths. Every single year, most conferences don't provide that. But when it comes to kind of thin slicing and picking out just a portion of an SEC schedule, nobody ever talks about that. I don't believe it's an intentional bias. I don't believe the national media truly is out to get Georgia. As I said with Florida a little earlier, sometimes it's just wishful thinking that things could be more balanced, more even, and in the eyes of the national media, a bit more interesting. But if you looked at schedules a different way, they're almost always going to favor the SEC if you do that. Chris Lowe at ESPN.com also points out that Tennessee, along with Ohio State and Arkansas, are the only 3 Power 5 teams in the country not playing any Power 5 opponents, or Notre Dame in their non-conference schedules, and playing all of their non-conference games in their home stadiums. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about over-under totals. For those of you who like to get a little action down, for Arkansas and Tennessee especially, low numbers for good reason, but relatively easy schedules, all things being equal in terms of what you could add to it. And for Tennessee, as we mentioned yesterday, bringing back more than 80% of their productivity from a year ago. Pretty experienced team. So pretty good stuff from Chris Lowe, ESPN.com. He talked about a couple other SEC teams, but we are not going to get to that for now. We will just simply instead make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, for a moment, I want to squeeze in a couple of your comments, let you chat about anything going on with today's program. I did some of this with our live video audience while the Greg McGarity interview was playing there as well. But I'll do some of this here for right now as a part of our regular video here thing. Howard Eubanks, when it comes to some of the stuff going on with Georgia, he says that Georgia is laying the foundation. People need to chill. And I think that Howard brings up an interesting point there in terms of what has happened for Georgia in the first 3 years under Kirby Smart, what could happen in the future as well, with Georgia building a recruiting machine and kind of an on-field apparatus that looks to be in contention for a national championship for a long time to come. 2019 is obviously a big year for Georgia because you've got some key juniors. You've got a quarterback in Jake Fromm. You've got an anchor to your offensive line in Andrew Thomas. You've got a lot of things like that. Potential superstar running back in DeAndre Swift kind of already emerged as a superstar running back in DeAndre Swift. And yet, I don't think the view for Georgia really changes all that much regardless of the outcome of the season. Georgia may get over that hump and win the national championship, or it may come up just short, so close one more time. And yet in 2020 and 2021, I believe that Georgia's still going to be among the 3 or 4 top contenders for the national championship. Chilling and enjoying the ride and enjoying that moment, as Howard Eubanks gives the advice on YouTube, that is probably a pretty good thing to think about. Devin Glenn says that Fromm will be in the Heisman race, and I don't have any doubt that that's true. I think that he is definitely on that short list of contenders. I think DeAndre Swift probably is as well. Now, getting to New York and being among those finalists, we've seen numbers in recent years that suggest you have to be eye-popping with your stats as a quarterback to be able to do that. And that level of achievement's available to Fromm. I don't know that that's where his season's going to go. It's obviously not easy to say that with any clarity right now, but in terms of being in the discussion all year long, having a chance to do that, there's no doubt that that's where Jake Fromm is right now. Groon D says that DeAndre Swift needs help. He can't do it all by himself. And I think the one thing that Georgia fans probably have the most confidence about going into this upcoming season is that the help will be there for DeAndre Swift. I pointed out statistically the other day that Georgia, since the offense has kind of gotten rolling here the last couple of years, has not given 20 or more carries in a game to a running back with regularity. Essentially hasn't really done that at all, with the exception of, I think, one time in the 2017 season. I think the DeAndre Swift will be much the same way in 2019 as well. He'll probably have the most rushing yards barring injury, but Georgia's going to look to heavily get Brian Herring, I believe, involved in the offense, heavily get Zamir White involved in the offense. There's a role for James Cook, and Cook's going to compete with the other 2 guys that I just mentioned to climb that hierarchy and pecking order even more. Georgia showed last year, after losing Chubb and Michelle, that it can insert DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield and still be just fine. I see no reason to believe that 2019 is going to be any different. All right, wrapping things up here on this particular Thursday, one more reminder for you. Coming back tomorrow, our last show for a week. We'll be on vacation next week, and we certainly appreciate all of you allowing us to do that. I am admittedly looking forward to being on the beach and relaxing just a bit. Of course, DawgNation.com will continue to keep you up to date on everything that happens, and who knows, if something big enough happens, maybe I may come up out of the beach and talk to you for a couple minutes or something like that. I'm sure some of you probably don't mind a week off from me either. I'll also tell you we have a loaded show tomorrow. It will be Jeff Sintel. Also, Terrence Edwards, the former Georgia wide receiver, is going to be with us. We'll talk to him about the outlook for the Georgia offense this year. Our buddy, Mr. College Football himself, Tony Barnhart, going to be here too. So we're loaded for a Friday show tomorrow. That's going to be fun. I'll also tell you 971 days. That's how long it's been since the lousy, stinking Gators have beaten Georgia. It's our Gator Hater Updater. We'll see you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily. And on video. I said this before our show started. I know a lot of you, joined during the show. As we transition to our R.S. Andrews cooldown, I will remind you that, boy, we've had a lot going on, it seems like, lately behind the scenes here. Today is no different on that. I do have to get off the air here in a couple of quick minutes. I'm going to take like 6 minutes of comments, rapid fire. And Connor, I know you've got some stuff you normally do. If you want to jump on now and just do that after, because we're going to be very, very quick with some comments. I want to give Connor a chance to weigh in on anything with the show today. So let's do as much as we can here in like the next, say, 5 or so minutes. We could go 10, but it probably needs to only be 5. I'll do that Facebook and YouTube and give you all a chance to kind of weigh in on this as well. Frank Crowder says his prediction is that Wisconsin running back Jonathan Taylor is going to win the Heisman. He did go over 2,000 yards a year ago. We saw Derrick Henry win the Heisman Trophy with a big season from a running back in 2015. I think you have to be in the national championship conversation to be able to do that. I don't believe Wisconsin will be. I think that once you go 2001 year, you also are kind of dealing with the weight of your own expectations the following year. So if really for any of these guys who were big names a year ago, I think it's always a safer bet to bet against them for the upcoming year's Heisman. And I'd say that even about, like, say, Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence. You saw Tua deal with the weight of expectations over the course of last season. Believe it or not, if you gave me even money on both sides, and maybe that's not such an unbelievable thing, I wouldn't even take Trevor Lawrence to win this year's Heisman Trophy. We have a decent track record of Heisman winners kind of coming out of nowhere a little bit. You got to keep that in mind. Mary Martin Corbin says, bad enough to have no formal. Now we will have no BA either. How will we survive? Well, Miriam, that's really nice of you to say. And I appreciate you allowing us to sneak away for a week. And when we come back, all I can tell you is we're going to be ready to go. We will have no days off between 2 Mondays from now, and other than like Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day, of course. But we'll have no days off through the February signing day. So we're going to be busy and ready to go.
Can you give us your best Bill Belichick impersonation saying no days off after a Super Bowl parade? No days off!
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Let's see. Kenneth Wiggins says Lawrence will have a sophomore slump. I don't know about that, but I will tell you this. I would not, and I almost did something on the show about this week, but it just seems so self-serving. I decided not to do it. But I'll tell you with all candor. There was a headline on ESPN.com the other day that said Trevor Lawrence might be the best draft draft prospect as a sophomore ever. I forget the wording.
Yeah.
But it was essentially that as a sophomore, no one's ever been a better draft prospect than Trevor Lawrence. I would not have wanted that to be written about Jake Fromm. I just wouldn't.
Nope.
I think a lot of the attention that Fromm's gotten this offseason is a little bit, makes me a little anxious. But to have that statement about your quarterback going into his second year after, when did he become the Clemson starter? Game 3?
After Game 4. Game 4 they played Georgia Tech. After that game, he named Lawrence the first full-time, or Dabo named him the full-time.
So he was essentially, if you want to count the playoffs, a starter for about 3/4 of the season. And they're already saying that, listen, I think Trevor Lawrence is really, really good. But as Connor Riley's pointed out a million times, he lost a high school game in Georgia. Okay, he lost to Blessed Trinity, a good, well-coached team, and with some college guys, but not a ton of five-star type guys. And they just flat out beat him. So it's not like every single moment for Trevor Lawrence on a football field has been perfect, including his last high school game. All I'm saying is I'm not predicting a sophomore slump for Lawrence. But I would not want to be tabbed as the best sophomore ever. I just wouldn't. I think that's a lot to carry into an upcoming season.
Is there any universe where he lives up to expectations? Like, the expectations for Lawrence have been set so sky high that I just don't see a world in which, he follows through, wins the Heisman. Even if Clemson does win it all this year and they play like they did last year, there were a lot of games where Clemson kind of sort of just like sleptwalked through and they won, 27-10, 35-17, things along those lines.
I just think the recency bias that inflicts, and listen, I'm a part of this too. I do this show every single day. But the college football media now, there's so much competition to be out there with content that I think it inflates a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who is legitimately a good quarterback. Yep. He can't play much better against Alabama than he did. Had Fromm played that well, Georgia would be the national champion right now. So you can't play much better against Alabama than Lawrence did, but it's just a lot to deal with. Matt Ruggiero,
can I bring something else up?
Please, by all means.
So, Georgia fans, they've made their peace with the fact that, Trevor Lawrence, a theoretical generational quarterback prospect, left the state to play suspend his collegiate career elsewhere. What if I told you that he wasn't the best player from the 2018 signing class to leave the state of Georgia to go play his collegiate sport somewhere else?
That's a really, really good thing. And I will say that off the top of my head, maybe I'm just dense right now. I don't know who you're talking about.
I'm talking about national champion Kumar Rocker.
Oh, wow.
Kumar Rocker played at North Oconee High School in the Athens area. He went there, started his high school career there when Tracy Rocker was the defensive line coach at Georgia. Ends up going to Vanderbilt. In a super regional elimination game, struck out 19 batters through a complete game no-hitter, walked 2 batters in that game. One of the all-time great pitching performances at any level.
I had seen him pitch a couple times this year. I was embarrassed to say, and I got chastised for this behind the scenes last week here at our DawgNation World headquarters. I didn't know that was Tracy Rocker's son. I just had heard of Kumar Rocker because he'd struck out the 19, and he has this kind of – I love these big guys with the high leg kick deliveries. I just think they look cool on the mound. And so I had known a little bit about who he was, but I'm just dumb sometimes. I didn't know that was Tracy Rocker's son.
Then in I believe in the College World Series game, struck out 11 batters in an elimination game when Vanderbilt was down 1-0. If they lost that game, they weren't going through, I believe, 6 1/3 shutout innings. An all-time great freshman season performance in a year where we saw freshmen play really well. I think he pitched better than Trevor Lawrence played football, and I think he played baseball better than Zion Williamson played basketball.
That's really interesting. I think that's a great take. Is there any story that's been written about why he chose baseball? I mean, a guy like that, I'm assuming, would have had a lot of sports as a youngster to choose from. The fact that he was attracted to baseball and became a dominant pitcher when his dad was one of the all-time great linemen in the SEC, defensive linemen in the SEC. Do we know what attracted him to baseball?
I don't, but it's clear he's very, very good at it. Apparently, he would have been a first-round draft pick a year ago, but he and his family were very set and comfortable with the idea of him going to Vanderbilt. And if he continues to pitch like he does, he will be a no doubt about it first-round prospect when it comes time for him to go into the MLB draft.
I wonder if, and then Oconee County's had some history with the quarterbacks, but I wonder if he ever tried to play quarterback or something like that, because a lot of pitchers do.
Yeah.
Tom House, the old pitching coach, used to use footballs as a teaching tool for throwing baseballs. That's kind of fun to think about. Matt Rugavina in our Facebook comment section brings up the alcohol stuff that Greg McGarity was just talking about, and he had a pitch about, here'd be my alcohol policy for Sanford Stadium, about when to serve and having a cutoff, and he was talking about some of the 12 o'clock games, 3 o'clock games, things like that. I have to say that in listening to McGarity talk and having him reflect some of the concerns I initially brought up, I've pretty well decided I'm actually against alcohol sales in Sanford Stadium.
He did a very convincing job sort of, playing up, why this might be a little bit problematic. And, I've been as staunch an advocate as anyone for, just sell the beer. But he made some really compelling points in there that made me pause and think, maybe this isn't the best thing in the world. I mean, there are plenty of drunk fans already at the game anyway. They're still going to get their alcohol in even if you don't sell it to them legally. And most of them, I can tell you, aren't getting drunk off of beer. So, I don't – well, I agreed. I don't think it, changes people getting any more rowdy at the games. I mean, they're still gonna enjoy their nice beverage, enjoy their nice bourbon as you do.
Sure. Because I'm I'm not a teetotaler.
No.
But I'm sort of against it at Sanford Stadium, and I guess my quick story is I compared this to the Masters at one point in time of if you restarted a golf tournament now, you would never ban cell phones, but there it kind of works and people are kind of okay with it. I think the same thing's true for a football venue as well, that if you started one from scratch today, you obviously wouldn't do without alcohol sales because that would just be the expectation. But it's been that way at Sanford Stadium for decades, and people are just kind of okay with it because of for whatever reason. I think it works. I mean, listen, my family and I, we go to the same restaurant every Friday night for dinner. They don't sell alcohol there. Now, we don't go there because they don't sell alcohol, but if you're already doing a good enough business without selling alcohol, the complication of getting the licenses and getting the government involvement, things like that, you just kind of sometimes choose not to do that, and that's kind of my feeling on that. All right, 2 minutes, and then we're off the air. Green Soldier says, is it possible that both Jake Fromm and DeAndre Swift would be in the top 10 of Heisman candidacy by the end of the season? We have a few examples of that. I would say that obviously the big examples would be like USC, where Leinart and Bush, and maybe at least one, probably just those two, but they were both top 10 type Heisman guys on the field together for a couple of years. They both won the award, I believe, didn't they? Didn't Leinart win the Heisman Trophy at one point?
Yes. Well, Bush technically didn't win it.
Right, but I would say that. Are there other examples?
I believe in 2016, Oklahoma had Baker Mayfield, the quarterback, and D.D. Westbrook, the wide receiver, both finished in the top 10. I believe they were both actually finalists that year. But obviously only Mayfield ended up winning the award that year. As far as that goes, I think that's the only
was Etienne a top 10 guy last year? Obviously, Clemson thinks he will be this year. Crystal Christie says, thanks for the gift card from Before the Hedges yesterday. Crystal, I'm really glad we were able to give that to you. It's kind of funny. I mean, between Connor and I both, we have, a pretty good memory on college football. So I'm probably not thinking of as many examples as I should be able to cite this. Surely some of those Florida State teams in the 90s when Chris Winkie was quarterback, who would the running back have been back then? I mean, it's got to have happened a few times, I'd say. I mean, because for the most part, the top 10 doesn't even really get all that much attention necessarily. Right. I think it's certainly a possibility. And honestly, for Georgia, even if one guy's 8th and one guy's 9th, that's probably a pretty good story for the Dogs offense here this upcoming season. Travis Baltzigar says, BA, where do you rank our secondary? Phil Steele ranked them outside of his top 10 units. This is going to sound like, Homer self-serving, feeding the audience what it wants. There's no way that there are 10 secondaries, I believe, better than what Georgia's going to have this year. I just don't think it's possible. I think that Eric Stokes has proven that he's a lockdown. I think that J.R. Reed's proven that he's whatever you want the leader of your safety unit to be. I think Richard LeCounte's better than some people realize, including some Georgia fans. Pro Football Focus, I would cite those numbers to help with that. And I think whoever starts at the other cornerback position is going to be a fire-breathing dragon. So I like Phil Steele. I don't like him as much as some people do. Stuff like this is probably an example as to why. I'm not saying that he's wrong for not including Georgia. I think the mistake he makes by excluding Georgia is the same mistake he makes in a lot of other places in that magazine. So, no, I do not believe there are 10 secondaries better than Georgia. Now, I've told you before, there's some position groups that I think you ought to be concerned about. I think one of the reasons why Georgia is absolutely a national championship contender is because of its secondary. And Connor and I both have been saying that, going back to what Kirby Smart was saying at the end of spring practice.
Before we get out, 2 quick trivia questions.
Okay, fun.
Who is the last Georgia player to finish in the top 10 in Heisman voting?
Ooh, this is a good trivia question. Let me try to do this fast. Too late. Is it Aaron Murray in 2012?
Nope.
Did he not finish the top 10?
I think he did, but he did not. There was someone more recent than him.
Okay, I apologize. Chubb in 2014?
Nope. More recent than that.
Really? Was it one of the guys in 2017? Oh, Roquan Smith in 2017.
Roquan Smith.
Excuse me. I apologize.
Highest ranked defensive player. I believe he finished 9th overall.
Good for him.
Follow-up trivia question. When was the last time Georgia had a top 3 Heisman Trophy finisher?
Ooh, that's good.
This one actually might be a little bit easier.
Top 3 Heisman finisher. Wouldn't have been Gurley in 2014. I don't believe it would have been Stafford or Marino. Dante Green says Marino. Do you have to go back to 92 with Garrison Hurst? Has it been that long?
You have to go back to 1992 with Garrison Hurst.
Incredible. I know that college football was loaded in the late 90s. College football was loaded because you had Woodson, you had Peyton, you had,
Randy Moss.
College football was loaded in the late 90s. I'd really love to go back and relitigate Champ Bailey in, say, 98. He was Georgia's best offensive and defensive player, and the team was not that bad. I wonder if Bailey got jobbed. And I'll take it to my grave. Garrison Hurst should have won the 92 Heisman. I know that people think that Marshall Faulk became a better pro, and he did. I believe that Garrison Hurst was the better of the 2 players in college, and Gino Toretta, the guy who won it, is a total joke.
Champ Bailey finished 7th in 1998. He was the highest finishing non-quarterback.
Okay. What year did Woodson win?
Or second highest, excuse me. Ricky Williams won it that year.
All right.
As a runaway
winner. So late 90s, there were a lot of big-time Heisman type guys. Frank DiCarlo says, don't forget about Hines Ward. He was good at Georgia, but he did become a much better pro than he was at Georgia, although he was one of those guys that played every position. And I've said before that, you're talking about like retired numbers and stuff like that. I mean, I think that Georgia's not going to do that anymore, but a guy like Hines, because he did so many different things, would be somebody I'd at least consider there in that regard. But nonetheless, a really fun conversation. All right, we got to go. Thank you all for everything. Huge thanks to Connor Riley for running the show solo here this week. Our buddy Michael Carvel.
Sorry about blowing out your eardrums earlier.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. So fun stuff there. As I said before, we are loaded tomorrow. It's Jeff. It's Mr. College Football, Tony Barnhart. Our buddy Terrence Edwards back with us, so we'll do all that with you tomorrow on a jam-packed getaway day for DawgNation Daily. Before we say goodbye, let me also say my friends at the AJC will keep you up to date on all your Atlanta news now. Braves got another winning Chicago last night. It's been a fun series, and we're heading towards a big weekend. I love the weekend preview stuff, all the happenings at the local parks and concert venues, things like that. Check that out at AJC as well, ajc.com. And throughout the day for all those news headlines, ajc.com for Atlanta News Now. R.S. Andrews for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. You know, it's hot this time of year. You don't want your house to be. You want it to cool down. That means you want that $99 Smiley tune-up, as my friends at R.S. Andrews, Dari, and the whole gang there, get your system back to factory fresh specs. Check them out online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow for a loaded DawgNation Daily. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for the cool down. We will see you then.